Mazel Tov and Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'd like to call attention to the stained glass windows. This is a timeline of Jewish history that is wrapped around our sanctuary. We are being enveloped on all sides by the story of our people. And the story is told in a very specific way. We have Abraham, first of all, the origin of monotheism. Then we have Moses, who witnessed the origin of our people coming together as a people. Then we have Isaiah, representing the age of the prophets. Then we have Yochanan ben Zakkai, representing the age of the rabbis. Then we have Maimonides, representing the medieval period of Jewish history. Coming around to this side, we have Moses Mendelssohn, representing the Enlightenment. Then we have the window that is dedicated to the 6 million. And Leo Baeck, Rabbi Leo Baeck, is shown prominently as a leader of that time out of the flames. And I'm going to come back to this last one here in just a moment. What you may have noticed in how the story of Jewish history is told in stained glass is the specific way of the great man of history theory, which was looming large in the 19th century and into the early 20th century. And we hear this teaching, this way of seeing human history, reinforced in the book entitled Festival of Freedom, a book of Rabbi Soloveitchik's teachings about Pesach. He writes, "History," Judaism says, "cannot move or progress without the individual. God waits for man if there is something to be done. God does nothing until man initiates action. God waits for man, for a single person, to accept responsibility and initiate the process of redemption, of Geulah." He continues, Rabbi Soloveitchik continues, "It is strange. On the one hand, God is the Goel Yisrael, the Redeemer, the Liberator. However, God wills man to become his own Shaliach. God calls upon humanity, on individuals, to become God's representative in the drama of redemption, a personal Shaliach with whom God will walk to bring about change in the world. God will not desert him, but God alone does not want to take the initiative. The Jewish people have been waiting a long time for the Messiah, a human being like us who will initiate the progress of redemption. God wants an individual great in knowledge, great in morality, great in prophecy, like all of these, to be a participant in the drama of Geulah. God wills man to emerge as a great being through his acceptance of the mission, of the shlichut. Not the collective, but the individual seizes the initiative, says Rabbi Soloveitchik. And his proof text is found in the book of Exodus. "It came to pass in the course of those many days that the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel groaned by reason of the bondage, and their cry rose up to God. And God saw their affliction, and God knew." Soloveitchik points to the first verse of the next chapter and draws a bridge from the end of the preceding chapter to the beginning of the new one, saying God was ready, the people were ready, time had passed, redemption was possible, and God could have taken the people out in a split second, but God had to wait for someone. And immediately we find chapter 3 begins with the words, "Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro." Introduce Moses. In steps Moses, up steps Moses. The problem with teaching history in this way, about the great person of history, I'll expand it to be gender inclusive, there's still a problem when we talk about the great person of history. It leaves us all searching for a great leader in our own time to rise up to guide us out of our suffering. And until that person emerges, we wring our hands and we ask, where is our Moses now? Where is our Churchill? Where is our Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King? Where is our Gloria Steinem? Who will come to lead us, if not rescue us, from whatever it is that enslaves, oppresses, and denies human dignity? So now I'd like to return to this last window that was installed. And they were installed over time, not all at once, over decades, actually. This window is entitled simply Tikva. It isn't a particular era of Jewish history. Instead, it is simply the hope. And who is the representative in this window? Who is the giant of intellect, of courage, of leadership and justice? Not one, but many. Thinkers like Einstein, humanitarians like Schweitzer, and also you see there unnamed and unrecognizable people who are innovators and initiative takers, lovers and laborers, ordinary people doing their best with their God-given time to make the world more likely to open the door to Eliyahu Hanavi. There we find ordinary people doing their best with their God-given talent to make the world more whole. Soloveitchik reinforced the great person of history theory by stressing that verse, enter Moses. But our Tikva window emphasizes the earlier verse that he quoted. The children of Israel groaned because of their bondage, and their collective cry rose up to God because of their bondage. Vayitz'aku, they cried together. They cried out with one unified voice. And that crying out to God, was not a passive act of a helpless people. That crying was an active and deliberate call of collective readiness. It was a signal, an invitation for God to enter human history. How? Not through one extraordinary person of that time, but rather an invitation for God to enter into human history through the hearts and minds of many. This is how we understand the story of human history unfolding. This is how one era gives way to the next, how one crisis can eventually dissipate. This is how a vaccine for coronavirus can be discovered. Can you name the one in the laboratory, in the single country who discovered the vaccine? No. It was a collaborative effort across many continents, scientists pooling their resources and sharing their innovations and their discoveries. This, too, is also how the war against Ukraine will be won. Yes, Zelensky is extraordinary, but he knows most of all, as does everyone in the world watching on, we all know that this war will only be won by the many people who have trained one another in courage, who have stepped forward to become instant soldiers, instant nurses, instant community organizers. And this too is also how Israel's democracy will be defended today. There is no one figure, but rather there are many, from the right and from the left, religious and secular, young and old, taking to the streets together to sing songs of justice and tikva. And this is also how our own city of Toronto will find its way out from under the many strains that we feel in the economy, in healthcare, in mental health care systems, in growing indiscriminate violence on our streets and subways, in the increasing hatred of minorities and newcomers. No matter who will be our next mayor, I assure you, we will see our way out from under this strain together by the hard work of teachers and social workers, nurses and parents and small business owners, and ordinary people who demand more and are willing to work for it and to give generously until it comes into being. Now we know that the great man of history theory is risky, just as messianism is risky. No longer do we wait for a Mashiach to come and save us from the world's problems. This morning, Jessica and Matthew brought little Riley to sit in the kisei, in the chair of Eliyahu Hanavi. And we invoked his name, inviting the prophet to come and see. See all the potential in this little one. See all the good that can come from her. And we saw you come to take to the Torah with all of your potential, with your growing voice and your growing confidence, and through a life of mitzvot, all that will come to be, all the good that will come from you. Like the title of Rabbi Larry Kushner's book, There is no Messiah, and you are it. So when we open the door to Eliyahu Hanavi on Wednesday night and we serenade him, Eliyahu Hanavi, we beckon him to join us at the table, to come and see all the good people gathered around. We invite him to come and witness that assembly and the power around that table, to see all the acts of chesed represented there, all the intentions for goodness and right that have been inspired through the words of the Haggadah. And there is that kos shel Eliyahu, the cup, waiting for him. I've come to appreciate a custom that I learned at the Seder table of my in-laws in Connecticut. They begin the Seder with the cup empty. The whole meal, it sits there empty, waiting for something to happen. And before we open the door and serenade Eliyahu Hanavi, we pass that empty cup around the table, and everyone takes a little bit of his or her own cup of wine and adds it to Eliyahu's cup. This is a symbolic way of showing that each one of us has a role to play in bringing that time of perfection, in bringing that time when no one is afraid, when no one is alone, when no one is hungry, and all are at peace. Our tradition teaches us to have humility, to say, I am not a prophet, and I am not even a descendant of a prophet. But our tradition also teaches us that each one of us carries the name of Malachi. The words of the Haftarah we read just moments ago, Malachi, God's messenger. The Seder is an exercise in knowing that each one of us is a witness and a driver of human history. Each one of us is a necessary and powerful part of that collective narrative. We say, I was a slave. I walked out of Egypt. I crossed the sea. We hear this in the words of Israel's poet Yehuda Amichai. He asks, what is the span of my lifetime? I am like one who left Egypt. The Red Sea is split in two, and I cross onto dry ground. With two walls of water on my right and on my left, Behind me, Pharaoh's soldiers and horsemen. Before me, the wilderness, and perhaps beyond the promised land. This is the span of my lifetime. And so, through our vote and through our voice, we take up the call, the privilege, the responsibility, for each of us is free to act. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asani b'nei chorin. You have created us, O God, as free people to do your will. Ken yehi ratzon.